Hey guys, Jose here from Transformative Stories Podcast. This is episode 2. Today I wanted to share with you guys another story, and this story goes back to when I was early on in college. Alright, so early on in college, I started attending this Christian church over in Oakland, and I ended up having the opportunity to go over to a youth convention. And I went 2 years in a row. The first year that I went was a brand new experience for me. So there's a lot of new things that I saw. I would often see people crying. I'd see people on the floor. I'd see people like speaking in this different language. And it wasn't a language that I was familiar with. It was actually something I'd never heard of. And that's when I got introduced to something called speaking in tongues that I had read about before in the Bible. Never really understood it, never really believed in it because I had never seen it. So I remember when I went, the first time I was very judgmental about people that were doing that. I always thought, I was like, these guys are doing it for attention. And I never really believed it to be true. I thought people were just kind of like caught up in their emotions or whatever, or they were mimicking, somebody else. So I was looking at those people with a lot of judgment. All right, so I remember the year that I went the first time, I saw some people speaking in tongues, and I remember I was, call it praying, and I said, all right, God, if you're real, then let me experience that. Let me be able to speak in tongues. And I was asking multiple times during my entire time there, and nothing ever happened. So I was pretty discouraged. I remember talking to somebody from the group, from the church group, and I said, hey, why can't I do that? Why are these people speaking in tongues and feeling God's presence and everything, and how come it's not happening to me? And he said, look at the way that you're asking him. You're asking God, you're testing him, you're saying, God, if you're real, then let me feel this, or let me experience this. And he kind of knocked some sense into me and said, don't do that. Don't treat God like that. If he wants to give you this gift, then he will give it to you. And if not, he's not going to. And so he said, what I recommend is you pray, you leave it in God's hands, and if he wants to give it to you, then he'll give it to you. And if not, then he's not going to give it to you. So I took his advice, and I just ended up praying for that gift specifically for a few weeks. Actually, I'd say maybe a few months after the convention. And just kind of a little bit of backstory of what was going on during this time. I was a new believer, meaning I had recently given my life to Jesus and kind of turned away from my lifestyle. And I was having a lot of doubt in my mind, right? I was very skeptical about Christianity. I was very skeptical about God. I had gone to God in the first place in a very desperate place. And so me asking for this gift was more of me really, in reality, just really wanting to sense God's presence and know that he is real. And so I prayed, for a few months. Nothing ever happened that convention. Nothing ever happened during those 2 months. And then I came back the next year. And I remember briefly remembering, about what I had been asking for the previous year. But not really, I wasn't very, really seeking it out as much as it was the first time. So I remember on this day that the pastor had told everybody, said, all right, I feel like God's going to do something. I'm going to ask you guys all to stand up and put your hand to the person to the left. And so my brother was standing to my left, or to my right, and he put his hand on me, and I don't remember who was standing to my left, or maybe I was sitting in the aisle, but all I remember is that I stood up, my brother put his hand on me, and I closed my eyes and just began to pray. And I don't know how long into the prayer, maybe about 30 seconds or a minute, I just felt this crazy presence just fall upon me. Something so heavy, something I'd never experienced before in my life. And I remember I just sat down on my chair and I was weeping. I was like tears and boogers and everything. But the craziest part about it was then my mouth started moving. These words started coming out of my mouth, and I remember just thinking, like, what is happening right now? Like, it was this language I could not understand. You know, I couldn't really wrap my mind around what was happening in that moment. And I just remember that there was moments of me speaking in this language that I didn't understand, and then other moments where I would just then shift into English and say, God, you are real. You are real, God. And it got even crazier after that. I remember feeling 2 sets of hands on my back and a set of hands on my head, and the person in front of me was praying. They were saying something, I can't recall it. But I remember after, I don't know how long I was sitting down for, maybe let's say 20 minutes, and you know, after composed myself, I opened up my eyes, I looked around, you know, there's a lot of people on the ground, a lot of people crying. And I remember just looking around me and there was nobody in front of me. And I looked behind me and there was nobody behind me. And I said, okay, well maybe, you know, somebody just walked by, put their hands on me, or put their hands on my back or on my head, and you know, then they walked away. So later on that day, you know, I was kind of sitting by myself, just really thinking about what had just happened. And I remember confronting my brother, and he's like, dude, did you see that? And he's like, yeah. I was like, dude, I was speaking in tongues. He's like, yeah, I know, I was there. You know, typical older brother response. And I said, and who put their hand on me? He said, what are you talking about? I said, who put their hand on me? He's like, I put my hand on you. I said, no, I know you did because you were touching my shoulder, but who's touching my back and who's touching my head? And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, dude, no, somebody touched me. Somebody touched my back and somebody touched my head. Who touched me? He said, what are you talking about? I had my eyes open and nobody was there. And I remember just thinking, that's crazy. The only thing I could think of, it must have been an angel. God must have sent somebody, you know, something was definitely touching my head and something was definitely touching my back, right? I know what someone's touch feels like. I've had somebody put their hand on my head. I've had people put on my back. I know what a hand feels like. I could feel somebody's hand on my head and on my back. And I opened my eyes and nobody was there, and I asked my brother and he said nobody was there. I had my eyes open. I was next to you the entire time. Nobody touched you. Till this day, I can't fully grasp, you know, who it was that put their hands on my head or on my back. But one thing is for sure that I cannot deny is that I felt the tangible presence of God on that day, and that forever changed my life. That forever changed my walk as a Christian. Yes, I go through life and I go through my struggles, I go through difficult things in life. I still struggle, you know, when I read scriptures or, you know, when things are going bad in my life, to believe that there is a God and that God is out there, especially in the times when things are going horrible. You know, you lose somebody, or you know, you lose your job, or something tragic happens in your life. I go through my moments of doubt, but I go back to that day and to the other times where I felt God's tangible presence, and just remember that God is always there, even if I can't always feel Him, Even if I feel like, I can't always hear him, I trust that he is always there. And that's what I want to leave you guys with today. I hope that you guys can take something away from the story that happened. And I pray that you guys will continue to seek God out too. Both of you guys that already believe in him, and have a relationship with him, keep asking for more of him. And for you guys that this is something weird, this is like, what the heck is Jose talking about? I hope that you guys could reach out to him and ask God to show himself to you as he did for me. Even though you guys might be feeling like he's not there. I'm going through this really hard time right now. He's not there. I hope that you guys would always cry out to him, because even though it may feel like he's not there, he is there. Thank you guys for listening. You guys have a great day.